Hi, and welcome to Velvet Whisper ASMR. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Before we begin, make yourself comfortable and let your head settle gently into the pillow beneath you. Allow your shoulders to soften. Take one slow, quiet breath in, and then gently let it go. Whatever happened today can remain outside this room for a little while. Nothing needs solving right now. Tonight, I'll read The Garden of Quiet Things, a gentle summer story about allowing the day to become still. You don't need to follow every word. If your thoughts drift, simply let them drift without any effort. And if you fall asleep before the ending, that's perfectly all right. Sleep is exactly where we're going. So settle beneath the covers, close your eyes whenever you're ready, and let our quiet story begin. In the little seaside town of Rosehaven, the warmest evening of summer arrived without even the smallest breeze. The roofs held the day's heat, and the narrow streets smelled softly of salt, sun-warmed stone, and jasmine. At the end of Lavender Lane stood a pale cottage with blue shutters and a garden no wider than a blanket. Nora had borrowed the cottage for one quiet week, hoping distance might make her tired thoughts easier to carry. She illustrated flowers for a seed catalog, painting every stem, vein, and petal with patient, careful strokes. Usually, she loved the work, but lately every finished page seemed to reveal 3 more waiting behind it. That evening, her table held paintbrushes, unanswered messages, cold tea, and a calendar crowded with small red circles. Yet the blue cornflower before her still looked wrong, though she had repainted its delicate center 7 times. Outside the open window, a pale moth tapped gently against the screen, then waited as if expecting an answer. Nora set down her brush. Her fingers remained curved around its absence, still trying to complete the unfinished line. The cottage was perfectly quiet, but inside her mind, tomorrow had already begun making lists and asking questions. She slipped on her sandals, left the lamp glowing low, and stepped outside to borrow a little darkness. She intended to walk only to the corner, just far enough for the night air to cool her thoughts. Lavender Lane was empty, except for crickets singing beneath the hedges and moonlight resting on every windowsill. Nora passed the bakery, the silent fountain, and 3 sleeping cats arranged like commas on a garden wall. Beyond the last house, she noticed a narrow path she could not remember seeing during any of her daytime walks. It ran between tall oleanders, where fallen pink petals made soft islands across the pale and dusty ground. At the path's end stood an old blue gate, set into a wall completely covered with jasmine and silver ivy. Its paint had faded into many shades, like pieces of evening sky gathered patiently across 100 summers. In the center was a small brass handle shaped like a crescent moon, unexpectedly cool beneath Nora's fingers. "The Garden of Quiet Things," it said. "Open after midnight for visitors who have carried enough for one day." Nora almost laughed, wondering which neighbor had created such an elaborate and charming little private joke. Then the church clock finished its 12th chime, and somewhere beyond the wall, hundreds of leaves stirred together. A path of white stones curved through darkness, each stone glowing faintly, as though moonlight lived beneath its surface. Nora hesitated only a moment, then stepped inside and heard the gate settle softly closed behind her. The air inside the garden was cooler, carrying the scent of mint, damp earth, night-blooming jasmine, and distant rain. Silver grasses leaned across the path, brushing one another with a sound like pages turning in another room. Small lanterns hung from pear trees, glowing without flame and swaying beneath branches that remained perfectly still. Nothing seemed arranged for display. The garden felt lived in, like a quiet house whose doors had been left open. There were roses the color of moonlight, blue ferns, white poppies, and tall flowers folded tightly around themselves. Somewhere nearby, water moved over stone with the patient rhythm of someone breathing deeply in peaceful sleep. Nora looked back. The blue gate remained visible, and its crescent handle shone reassuringly through the jasmine. It was closed, but not locked. She understood this, without checking, and the knowledge made her shoulders soften. Beside the path stood a wooden bench, wide enough for two, with a folded linen blanket resting at one end. Beyond it were neat garden beds, each marked by a little slate sign written in looping silver letters. One sign read, "Things that can wait." Another said, "Questions without answers yet." A third simply said, "Not tonight." The plants beneath them looked ordinary, though their leaves gave off the faintest glow whenever Nora moved closer. She was bending to read another sign when a lantern appeared between the trees, moving steadily toward her. An elderly woman followed, wearing a straw hat and carrying a watering can painted with tiny golden stars. "Good evening," the woman said, as naturally as if Nora had arrived for tea at a perfectly reasonable hour. Her name was Elowen, and she had kept the garden for longer than Rosehaven's oldest clocks could accurately remember. "You came because your body is tired and your thoughts are not," she said, without making it sound like a question. "Gardens have fences," she explained, "but this one has never needed, to keep a weary person on the wrong side." Nora began to apologize for entering, but Elowen smiled and pointed toward the unlocked blue gate behind them. "We grow the thoughts people cannot carry into sleep," she answered. "By morning, most become lighter things." From a stone table, Elowen poured cool lemon balm water into a small cup decorated with painted green leaves. "Nothing is erased, and nothing important is lost. We simply give each thought somewhere else to exist overnight." Elowen touched one closed flower. Its petals relaxed slightly, as though recognizing the warmth of her hand. Nora thought of the cornflower, waiting beneath her lamp, its center repainted until the paper had become thin. They passed a bed of low violet plants labeled, "Conversations that do not need rehearsing again tonight." Whenever the breeze moved through them, their leaves released half-formed sentences, then let the sentences dissolve harmlessly. A row of pale yellow flowers grew beneath the words, "People who may be disappointed and will still be all right." Nearby, soft gray moss covered a sign reading, "Mistakes that have already taught everything they can before morning." The clover held hundreds of dewdrops, though the rest of the garden remained dry beneath the cloudless sky. Each shining drop reflected a tiny kitchen, desk, laundry basket, inbox, or room waiting patiently to be tidied. "Write one thing your mind keeps returning to," she said. "The sentence does not need to be graceful or wise." Elowen handed Nora several small pieces of paper made from pressed leaves, seeds, and fine blue flower fibers. Nora wrote, "The catalog may be late," then folded the paper once, resisting the urge to improve the wording. They planted it beneath a moon-pale fern, where the soil closed over it with a quiet, almost contented sigh. Another paper received. "Someone may think I should have done more." Nora planted that one beneath the yellow flowers. With each small burial, the garden grew no darker, yet Nora felt less crowded inside her own breathing. The moon floated inside it, perfectly whole, although the real moon remained high above the pear tree branches. Elowen dipped her star-painted watering can into the pool, lifting silver water without disturbing a single ripple. "This is borrowed moonlight," she explained. "It belongs to no one, so the garden never runs out." She gave Nora a smaller brass can, no larger than a teacup, and showed her a row of sleeping moonflowers. The closed flower did not open, but its leaves lifted gently, receiving what they needed without hurrying the result. Nora poured one shining drop beside the first stem. Tiny points of light traveled downward through the waiting soil. She watered the next plant, then the next, moving slowly enough to hear each silver drop touch the earth. Nora noticed her hand had stopped gripping the handle. The little watering can rested easily against her palm. "Moonlight is not a prize for flowers that worked hard," Elowen said. "It arrives because night has arrived." "And sleep?" Nora asked. Elowen smiled. "Sleep is not payment either. It is simply one of night's gifts." Nora sat at the water's edge, letting silence finish a thought she no longer needed to understand. They placed both cans beside the pool and watched the reflected moon tremble once, then become perfectly still. Beyond the pool, a narrow path curved beneath an archway woven from honeysuckle, grapevine, and flowering thyme. Dozens of white moths rested along the branches, their folded wings resembling tiny letters with no addresses. It gathered a thread of golden light upon its wings, then drifted upward into the dark pear tree canopy. The others followed one by one, carrying delicate sparks until the high branches looked scattered with quiet stars. Nora thought, "I should have washed the cup before leaving," and a nearby moth immediately began to glow. She laughed softly. The moth rose, carrying the thought away without judgment, urgency, or even particular interest. Soon they entered a small orchard where figs, peaches, and apricots warmed the air with their sleepy sweetness. Lavender grew between the trees, and every step released a little fragrance from the pale path beneath them. An owl called once from somewhere beyond the wall. No answer came, and the owl appeared entirely satisfied. Nora felt the night against her arms, the ground beneath her sandals, and her breath arriving without instruction. "Not every path needs a destination," Elowen said. "Some paths exist only to return you gently to your body." They continued beneath the moth-lit branches, walking slowly enough that even their shadows seemed rested. The path ended at a small summer house with open windows, pale curtains, and a roof covered in white roses. Inside were 2 woven chairs, a round table, a blue teapot, and shelves filled with mismatched glass jars. No clock hung on the walls. In its place, a paper moon turned lazily within the warm night breeze. The jars carried handwritten labels: "Tomorrow," "Not mine to carry," "Good enough," "Still becoming," and "No reply required." Nora noticed an unfinished embroidery hoop on the window sill, holding half a bird and 3 loose green threads. Its fragrance mingled with chamomile as hot water moved softly into the cups, golden beneath the little lamp. On the table lay a sketch of the garden, with one corner blank and several pathways ending in uncertain lines. Nora instinctively reached for a pencil, then stopped. The empty corner remained empty, and nothing terrible followed. "Some things are unfinished because they are growing," Elowen said. "Others are unfinished because they are enough." They drank without speaking. A curtain breathed inward, then outward, carrying the scent of roses through the room. Behind the teapot stood a narrow wooden shelf containing 12 small drawers, each fitted with a porcelain handle. On another paper she wrote, "I cannot control how carefully other people understand me, even when I explain." Nora wrote, "I may not finish everything on time," and placed the sentence inside the waiting drawer. The 4th was simpler. "I am tired, and I do not want to earn the right to say so." A 3rd admitted, "I keep turning small delays into evidence that I am failing at my entire life." "Important things can wait somewhere safe," Elowen said. "Urgency is not the same as devotion." Nora worried that setting the thoughts aside might be careless, but the drawer felt less like forgetting than safekeeping. At that, a tiny bell sounded from the garden, although no wind moved through the summer house. They returned to the pool, where moths hovered above the water, and every lantern had softened to a pearly glow. Nothing touched it, no hand adjusted its stem, and no voice encouraged the flower to open more quickly. Then one white petal loosened, followed by another, each unfolding with the ease of a slow and generous breath. The flower opened outward until it was wider than Nora's hands, and bright enough to illuminate the surrounding leaves. Some were large, some small, and several remained closed. Elowen regarded every one with the same peaceful expression. "Those may open tomorrow," she said, "or next week. A closed flower is not a flower doing badly." Nora watched the great white bloom floating above its stem, offering fragrance without asking whether anyone noticed. She understood then that rest did not interrupt the garden's life. Rest was woven quietly through everything alive. When she opened them, the night felt spacious enough to hold tomorrow without bringing it any closer. At last, Eowyn led Nora back along the white path, past the silver grasses and softly labeled garden beds. "Plant it wherever you most often forget to pause," she said. "It will know what kind of reminder to become." "The gate appears when the night is ready," she answered. "But sometimes remembering the garden will be enough." Nora stepped through. The gate closed gently, and the jasmine-covered wall became ordinary beneath the paling sky. Lavender Lane waited exactly as before, though the stones had cooled and the crickets were singing more slowly. From the bakery came the first warm scent of bread, drifting between the houses, before any windows showed light. Nora walked past the sleeping cats, the fountain, and the dark shop fronts, without planning the hours ahead. Inside the cottage, her lamp still glowed beside the unfinished cornflower and the cup she had not washed. She closed the paint box, left the brush where it was, and placed the small seed beside the blue ceramic cup. Then Nora opened the bedroom window, lay beneath the cool sheet, and fell asleep before finishing her next thought. She woke late to sunlight moving across the bedroom wall and the sound of doves beneath the cottage roof. Nothing had collapsed. The catalog remained unfinished, the cup remained unwashed, and morning had arrived without accusation. Nora answered one message, moved one deadline, and painted the cornflower center with 3 simple, imperfect strokes. Then she stopped, deciding the page had said everything a cornflower page truly needed to say. For several weeks, nothing appeared. Nora watered the soil anyway, without digging to check whether progress existed underneath. She began closing her paint box before midnight, leaving one small task unfinished as a promise to the following day. Sometimes the old urgency returned, tapping at her thoughts like a moth against a summer window screen. On those nights, she imagined a tiny thread of worry becoming lantern light and rising harmlessly into the branches. Once, during a particularly crowded week, the blue gate appeared again at the end of Lavender Lane. Nora smiled when she saw it, but did not enter. She already knew where her thoughts could safely rest. Nora smiled when she saw it, but did not enter. She already knew where her thoughts could safely rest. Its white petals turned toward the night, asking for no praise and offering no apology for having taken its time. At home, the moonflower finally bloomed, opening above the unfinished catalog, beneath a quiet and ordinary moon. And now, you may leave every unfinished thought in that quiet garden, safely waiting beneath the moon. The moonflower closed at sunrise, not because anything was wrong, but because even beautiful things must rest. Let your breathing become softer. Let the pillow hold you, and allow the room around you to grow still. Let your breathing become softer. Let the pillow hold you, and allow the room around you to grow still. Good night from Velvet Whisper ASMR. Sleep deeply, dream gently, and let tomorrow arrive in its own time.